This Floyd Mayweather MMA UFC story is picking up momentum now. See, a lot of people instinctively dismissed, I might have instinctively dismissed the idea that Mayweather would step in the octagon in the past. But the way it's looking at the moment, it seems as though Mayweather might actually do it. And I know people are saying, oh, Mayweather's a coward, he'd never step in the octagon. Money talks, people. This guy, Mayweather, loves money more than most people. And he's already beat McGregor in a boxing ring. Perhaps he thinks it's a worthwhile risk, a worthwhile gamble, if the money is right, because the money is going to be astronomical for Mayweather to step in the cage with McGregor. And remember, when Mayweather-McGregor was being talked about in terms of the boxing match, initially, most people dismissed it. Most people said, oh, that will never happen. They're just talking. You know, many prominent figures in boxing came out and dismissed it. It will never happen. They're just talking. They're just keeping each other's names up there and using each other for promotional purposes. Mayweather's just doing it to keep his name relevant. He loves the spotlight, etc., etc. So people dismissed that. It still went ahead, to the surprise of many. And Mayweather stepping in the octagon, at this point, I actually wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Because, like I say, the guy loves money far more than most people. He has apparently, he is to begin training with UFC welterweight champion Tyrone Woodley. And Mayweather hasn't applied for his license yet. But, you know, he says, this is Woodley here saying, I think we're going to start most of it next week. I think we're going to start some of the strategy talks next week, and we might get some sessions in as well. He does not have to go out there and start learning how to kick like Bruce Lee. He does not have to go out there and become a black belt overnight. He just has to be able to stop it and to get within boxing range. And I think everybody in the UFC, he's going to be able to handle his own. With. All right, so yeah. I remember watching an interview with UFC legend Ken Shamrock, and he said that he actually believes it's easier for a boxer to transition into MMA than it is for an MMA guy to transition into boxing, unless the MMA guy's already got a boxing background. But if it's two people starting from scratch, an MMA guy who's never done boxing or a boxing guy who's never done MMA, he believes it's easier for a boxer to transition into MMA than vice versa. And Ken Shamrock said that basically a boxer doesn't need to learn all the MMA skills. He doesn't need to become a rounded MMA fighter to be fairly successful at a decent level in MMA. All he needs to learn is successful takedown defense. If he can learn to defend the takedown and stay on his feet, he can have a lot of success in MMA. This is what Ken Shamrock said. Mayweather is talking about training for several months. I think they said something like, well, yeah, here he's saying 6 to 8 months of training, okay, in MMA, takedown defense and all that kind of business. So can he learn enough in that time, takedown defense, to be able to compete with Conor McGregor? Conor McGregor, I'm no expert on UFC at all, but my understanding is that Conor McGregor is more of a stand-up guy. He's more of a striker. He's not really that much of a wrestler. Obviously, he's a hell of a lot better wrestler than Mayweather's going to be. But generally speaking, as UFC fighters go, as MMA fighters go, McGregor is more of a striker than a grappler. And that could play in Mayweather's favor if this fight actually goes ahead. I know a lot of people are going to scoff at this particular showdown if it does happen. They're going to call it a freak show and all that kind of business. Personally, I'm quite interested because I was always interested from a very young age in hand-to-hand combat of all kinds. I remember when the UFC first started, there was no weight classes. They just threw everybody in there. Sumo wrestlers, boxers, street fighters. And I was amazed to watch it. It wasn't so much about grappling in the early days of UFC. There was far more striking and what have you. The art form hadn't evolved at that point. It was still very raw. It was still guys coming in there practicing their own disciplines, like the kickboxers were doing kickboxing, etc. So the sumo guy was trying to do sumo, you know. So I've always been interested in these cross-discipline fights. When I was a kid growing up, we always used to have debates about who would win in a fight between, I don't know, Mike Tyson and Bruce Lee and stuff like that. Because two people practicing two different martial arts. These things always fascinated me. So Mayweather stepping in the octagon, I ain't gonna lie, I'll be watching it. I'll be interested to see how Mayweather can do, what he's managed to learn in the octagon. Not gonna lie, I'll be watching. So we'll have to wait and see if it's actually going to take place. Mayweather might start training and then realize, you know what, I can't do this. This is too difficult. And one thing I do have to say in closing is that Mayweather has contradicted himself many, many times during his career. And if he goes ahead and steps in the octagon, it'll be another case of him contradicting himself massively, because Mayweather was a huge critic of MMA and UFC for many, many years. He said that throwing two guys in a cage together to fight, what human beings do that? We do that to animals. This is, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what Mayweather has said in the past. He's been very critical of MMA, but now it appears that he's going to be doing it himself, potentially. Very hypocritical. It is what it is. I'll still be watching it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about this particular story. It's happening. I'm out.